Not with fire, not with chaos, but with distraction. Perhaps you've already felt this. It was as if something was wrong, but nobody talked about it. As if the world had changed. Silently. What if the beginning of the apocalypse wasn't something that it will happen, but something that's already here, and almost nobody noticed? Stay until the end, because when you see the sign that went unnoticed, nothing will seem like a coincidence anymore. When people talk about the apocalypse, most imagine a single moment, a specific day, a great explosion, the visible collapse of everything. But this idea, although popular, may be the biggest misinterpretation ever made. The word apocalypse itself doesn't mean destruction. It means revelation, to remove the veil, to show what has always been hidden. And the revelations don't happen all at once. They happen gradually. What the scriptures suggest is not a sudden end, but a silent, progressive, almost imperceptible process. A change that infiltrates routines, values, the way people think and act, until what once seemed unthinkable becomes normal. The world doesn't end overnight. It changes slowly, without fanfare, without. This is how the great cycles of history have always ended, not with a bang, but with a whisper. While everyone awaits a grand sign in the sky, the real movement happens within society, within the collective consciousness, within what comes to be accepted without question. The beginning of the apocalypse, if it is truly a process, wouldn't need to be perceived by everyone. On the contrary, it would only work if almost no one noticed, if it were disguised as progress, advancement, adaptation. When the process becomes visible, it is already too advanced to be ignored. Perhaps that's why so many feel that something is out of place, even without being able to explain what. It's not the ending that's frightening, it's the realization that it didn't begin with chaos, but with normality. And when the revelation is finally complete, the question is no longer there, when it all started, but why did it take us so long to realize? In the book of Revelation, the 7 seals are presented as the beginning of everything. Before the trumpets, before the bowls, before the visible chaos, there is this almost forgotten moment, the opening of the seals. And the most disturbing detail is that in the beginning there are no explosions, no screams, no immediate destruction. There is silence. The seals don't announce the end in a spectacular way. They reveal processes. Each open seal exposes a layer of reality that was already present, but hadn't yet been fully revealed. It's as if the world continues to function normally, while something profound is being unraveled behind what is visible. This initial silence is not an absence of action, it is an absence of perception. The changes begin discreetly, almost invisibly, so that only those who observe attentively can notice. The Bible does not describe the beginning of the apocalypse as a collective shock, but as a sequence that unfolds while humanity remains too busy to perceive it. Perhaps that's why so many readers rush through this part, expecting something more impactful, but the mystery lies precisely there. The silence may be the clearest sign that something has begun. When the noise finally arrives, the seals have already served their purpose. If the apocalypse were announced with a bang from the very beginning, everyone would react. But if it begins in silence, only a few awaken. And this possibility raises a disturbing question. What if the 7 seals were not opened to be heard, but to be ignored? Because when no one understands the beginning, the process moves forward freely. And when humanity finally realizes it, what seemed distant is already much closer than imagined. If while listening to all this, you feel that these ideas don't sound strange, but familiar, then you're already perceiving beyond the surface. And if this type of content makes you think differently about reality, leave your like now. This helps the channel continue bringing analyses that almost no one dares to do. It's a simple way to show that this type of reflection still matters, and that not everyone accepts living only in what is visible. When you observe the world attentively, something begins to stand out. These are not isolated events, nor distant occurrences. They are global changes happening simultaneously in different places, affecting how people live, think, and relate to each other. What once would have caused shock is now treated as routine. Chaos no longer arrives as a surprise. It is expected, discussed, accepted. Crises overlap, values are inverted, truths become relative, and yet life goes on as if nothing were out of place. People adapt too quickly. They learn to live with fear, with instability, with a constant sense of urgency. The extraordinary becomes commonplace. The alarming becomes normal. This is perhaps one of the clearest signs, not the problem itself, but the way it ceases to bother us. The normalization of chaos doesn't happen overnight. It's built up little by little until questioning becomes tiresome and acceptance seems easier. The world keeps turning. Routines continue, entertainment continues, even when everything indicates that something profound is shifting. The scriptures speak of a time when many would see, but few would understand. A period when signs would be everywhere, but would be interpreted as coincidence. After all, it's more comfortable to believe that all this is just a passing phase than to face the possibility of a pattern forming before us. And perhaps the most unsettling question is not whether something is happening, but why so many are able to perceive that something is wrong, and yet choose to move forward as if everything were normal. Because when the world continues to smile amidst the collapse, silence returns to fulfill its role, and the process advances unnoticed under the guise of normality. The question isn't why the world is changing. The real question is why so few people seem to notice, and the answer may lie less in the events themselves and more in how human attention is constantly captured. Distraction isn't just a side effect of the modern age, it's become a strategy. When the mind is constantly occupied, there's no room left for reflection. The scriptures already warned about this. A time when many would have eyes but would not see, ears but would not understand. Not for lack of signs, but for an excess of noise. Too much information, too many stimuli, too many artificial urgencies. All to keep consciousness turned outward, never inward. This is the most effective form of spiritual blindness. It's not denying what's happening, it's simply not stopping to think about it. The mind gets used to the constant flow and loses the ability to question. And when I question, it disappears, I realize too. Therefore, those who begin to feel that something is out of place often feel displaced, as if they were seeing something that others don't see. Not because it's special, but because they've slowed down enough to observe. Perceiving requires inner silence, exactly what almost no one has anymore. Perhaps awakening isn't a gift reserved for a select few, but a choice many avoid making, because seeing changes everything. And when you start to see the patterns, it becomes impossible to go back to believing that everything is just coincidence. It's at this point that the true division forms, not between those who know and those who don't, but between those who prefer to remain distracted and those who have chosen to see. If all of this makes sense to you, it's because you're perhaps already seeing beyond the surface. And if you want to continue on this path, subscribe to the channel now. The next videos will delve deeper into revelations that almost no one discusses, connecting ancient patterns with the current world in a way you'll hardly see anywhere else. This isn't content for distraction, it's for those who choose to pay attention. There's a common idea that talking about the apocalypse spreads panic, but this interpretation completely reverses the problem. The real danger has never been fear. It's been unconsciousness. Fear, when it exists, at least acknowledges that something is wrong. Indifference does not. This content is not meant to cause terror, nor to predict dates or announce disasters. It is an invitation to awareness. Because what truly weakens a society is not knowing that it is facing a critical time, but pretending that nothing is happening while the signs accumulate. Ignoring warnings has always been more destructive than heeding them. Throughout history, civilizations have fallen not because they realized too much, but because they realized too late. Collapse rarely comes as a surprise. It announces itself slowly until it becomes impossible to deny. Fear paralyzes for a moment, but awareness transforms. It leads to reflection, to choice, to a change of attitude. That is why the scriptures do not treat revelation as a threat, but as a warning, a call to awaken before the process advances to the point of no return. Perhaps the greatest risk is not imagining bleak scenarios, but continuing to live as if the signs didn't exist. Because when silence is mistaken for peace and normality for safety, humanity approaches danger without realizing it. And at that point, the problem is no longer the end. It's the refusal to see it while there's still time to understand. One of the first objections that arises when discussing Revelation is the same as always: dates. Many ask when everything will happen, as if the end could be marked on a calendar. But the scriptures never treated prophetic time in this way. The Bible doesn't function like a human timetable. It speaks of seasons, cycles, spiritual moments, not specific days. Throughout history, countless predictions have failed precisely because they attempted to transform symbols into exact numbers. Each announced and unfulfilled date does not invalidate the prophecy. It merely reveals the error of those who tried to fit the divine into human logic. The problem was never the message, it was the misguided expectation. The biblical focus is not on when, but on how. Not on counting days, but on recognizing signs. Prophetic time is perceived through changes in behavior, the inversion of values, and the repetition of patterns that intensify. When this kind of time arrives, it is felt before it is understood. Perhaps that's why many get frustrated. They wait for a clock when they should be observing the environment. The apocalypse doesn't advance by dates, but by stages, and each stage reveals something about the condition of humanity. Understanding this doesn't require calculations, but discernment, because true prophetic time isn't measured in numbers. It's recognized in consciousness. If there is one sign that runs through all prophecies and almost never receives attention, it is not something spectacular, it is something constant, a silent pattern that repeats itself whenever a major transition is underway. It doesn't appear as something new, but as an intensification. It doesn't point to the distant future, but to the present we are living now. This sign is not in a single event, but in the convergence of many. When different areas of human life begin to shift simultaneously, moral, spiritual, social, psychological, something deeper is happening. The Bible describes this type of moment not as immediate chaos, but as a period in which everything continues to function, but out of balance. The sign that almost no one noticed is this: the gradual loss of reference points. Truths cease to be solid, values become negotiable, right and wrong become context-dependent. It's not that the world is at war all the time, it's that it no longer knows which direction it's heading. And this isn't something that's going to happen. It's something that's already happening. The prophecy speaks not only of destruction, but of confusion, of a time when people would follow, but wouldn't know exactly what. They would believe, but wouldn't know in what. A world full of information and empty of discernment. When this pattern becomes visible, everything starts to fall into place. The changes cease to seem random. The constant feeling of displacement acquires a name, and the question changes. It's no longer, is this real? But how did I not notice it before? Perhaps the clearest sign of the apocalypse is not the end of things, but the revelation that what sustained people's inner world is dissolving before our eyes. And when this revelation happens, there is no shock, there is recognition, because deep down, many always knew that something was wrong. They just lacked the understanding of what it was. When everything is reduced to its essentials, the apocalypse ceases to be about the end of the world and becomes about the end of masks. It doesn't come merely to destroy, but to reveal. To reveal who we are when structures fail, when certainties disappear, when that which sustained us no longer sustains us. In this sense, the apocalypse functions as a mirror. It doesn't create darkness, it merely exposes what was already there. It reveals intentions, priorities, and true values. In times of stability, it's easy to appear firm. In times of revelation, every choice becomes visible. Therefore, prophecy does not treat humanity as a single entity. It points to individual decisions. Faced with the revelation, some awaken, others shut down. Some seek understanding, others prefer denial. The same scenario produces completely different reactions. And this is where the theme becomes human. It's not about predicting what will happen to the world, but about observing what is happening within each person. The apocalypse doesn't force answers, it exposes paths. Each person decides how to react to what they see. Perhaps the greatest impact lies not in the external changes, but in the silent question that arises when everything begins to unfold. Who do I become when what I trusted ceases to exist? That is the true revelation. And it doesn't destroy, it defines. Perhaps the biggest mistake when imagining the apocalypse is expecting a scenario impossible to ignore. Fire, ruins, immediate collapse. But what if it was never intended to begin this way? What if the true beginning wasn't marked by chaos, but by indifference? Throughout everything we've seen, one idea is repeated. The apocalypse isn't enough to frighten, it's enough to reveal. It doesn't interrupt the world all at once, but settles in while life goes on as normal. While people adapt, justify, normalize. Not because they are bad, but because they have been trained not to stop, not to reflect, not to perceive. If this is true, then the most important question is no longer when it will all end. It's at what point we decide to stop seeing, because the beginning of any revelation happens the instant someone chooses to pay attention. The apocalypse may have already begun, not as a distant event, but as a silent process. And in the face of it, there is no collective response. There is only individual choice, to ignore, to deny, or to awaken. Each path leads to a different destination. Perhaps the final warning isn't about the end of the world, but about the end of distraction, about the moment when each person needs to decide whether they will continue living on autopilot or whether they will have the courage to face what is being revealed before their very eyes. Now I want to know, do you think the apocalypse has already begun? Write in the comments. Your opinion can open other people's eyes.